Hello and surprise. Here I am. Let me put on my glasses. Oh my gosh. This is like way close to my face here. Whatever. So, hello everybody. Jax West from Stephen Avery Project, Justice with Jax, and MAM Gossip. I just got my copy from Amazon of John Ferrick's Wrecking Crew. This is the 5th anniversary edition with updated content and an exclusive new interview with Stephen Avery. So I figured we would have story time and read you. I've already got it marked in here where the new information is. So we will read and discuss the new information. If you have never read John Ferrick's book, I highly recommend it. So you can get it on Amazon. That's where I ordered it from. Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Stephen Avery. And make sure you get the 5th anniversary edition. All right. So let's get started at the end of this book where it is 5 years later. Now, see, there's still all this much information still in here for you all to read yourself. We've gone over that before in the past, though. New witnesses emerge. After the November 2018 publication of Wrecking Crew, world-famous exoneration lawyer Kathleen Zellner sharpened her focus, suggesting Bobby Dassey, Stephen Avery's dark and disturbed nephew, was Teresa Halbach's real killer. On a beautiful fall afternoon of September 29, 2023, Zellner and I met on the patio of a Starbucks coffee shop near her suburban Chicago law offices near Naperville. Naperville is one town over from me. How come it's... Oh, hello, Natalie. I'm like, I can't see comments. I had to scroll down more. And just know anybody who comes on here, if you ask me questions, then I'm obviously looking and reading a book. I may not see your comments, so don't think I'm ignoring you. Just I'm looking at the book. During the interview, I told her, quote, "It seems like you and your staff go above and beyond, not only to prove the innocence of your client to the court, but to show the court, show the police, show the public, and everyone else interested who the real killer was in that particular case. That's been true in many, many of your famous cases. With Making a Murderer in Stephen Avery, I was curious how you feel about Bobby Dassey, Stephen Avery's nephew. What's led you to be convinced that Bobby Dassey, in your eyes, is the killer of Teresa Halbach?" Unquote. Quote, "We have tried to create, and the best way to create reasonable doubt in a murder case is to point the finger at someone else," Zellner explained. "And we've done that over the years very successfully. So in the Avery case, we started out looking at the police. There were people who actually thought that the police had arranged the murder. And we were able to quickly dispel all of that. We also learned that the blood vial was not the source of Stephen Avery's blood." I don't know if I agree with that. So then I knew that it had to be somebody very close to Stephen and had to be somebody inside the family. So we began to really look at the individuals on the property at the time of the murder, and everything led back to Bobby Dassey. We uncovered that he had lied in his trial testimony about seeing Teresa walking towards Stephen's trailer. Teresa left the property, and he knew that. We believe that he followed her. He told numerous lies, including where the computer was in the house. He told lies about seeing Scott Toddock on the road. There were a number of things that pointed back to him. Stephen has always felt that he was involved because he was very obsessed with Teresa Halbach. And so all of those things have led us to file the various motions. Now, we've got a direct connection with the crime because we've got an objective witness who's got no stake in the case, who's identified Bobby with the murder victim's car. So we've got the direct connection. We think we've established motive and opportunity, unquote. During these past 5 years, since Making a Murderer Season 2 aired, millions of people have continued a spirited debate on various social media platforms regarding the Wisconsin judicial system's staunch refusal to grant Stephen Avery a new murder trial. Despite the political shift in power from Republican to Democratic control of the governor's office and attorney general's office, both of Wisconsin's political parties remain unsympathetic toward Avery and his condemned nephew, Brendan Dassey, the younger brother of Bobby Dassey. While Avery and Brendan Dassey remain heroes to the wrongful conviction movement, this I wouldn't call them heroes. Okay. Sorry, where was I? Remain heroes to the wrongful conviction movement. The simple-minded uncle and mentally challenged nephew remain banished from society, locked away from the outside world at their respective Wisconsin prison facilities. On July 8, 2021, Stephen Avery lost his biggest supporter, and he was not able to be at his mother's bedside when Dolores Avery died after battling dementia. She was 83. Fate has dealt another cruel blow to Stephen Avery today, right before his birthday tomorrow, Zellner declared on Twitter in July 2021. His mother, Dolores Avery, passed away at 6:50 a.m. He needs your support now more than ever. Dolores Avery had stuck with her son since the beginning of his horrible nightmare way back in 1985. She never wavered in her belief of his innocence when corrupt Manitowoc Sheriff Tom Kosarik framed her son, derailing his life for 18 years for the barbaric and brutal rape. She wasn't raped. And I'm not diminishing what happened to her, but she was not raped. It was an attempted rape. Rape of Manitowoc businesswoman Penny Bernstein along the sandy shores of Lake Michigan during the sweltering summer of 1985. Years later, Avery's mother remained in her son's corner during the Teresa Halbach murder trial, insisting to everyone willing to listen that Stephen was innocent of the killing. In May 2022, less than 1 year after his mother's death, Avery left the maximum security prison in Waupun, but it wasn't to regain his freedom. The Wisconsin Department of Corrections moved Avery to the medium security prison Fox Lake Correctional Institution. The distance from Manitowoc to Fox Lake is 95 miles. Quote, Stephen Avery, the biggest blow to him was when his mother died, unquote, Zellner explained during our interview on September 29, 2023. Quote, but he's got some very real friends, and he's got one friend from Australia. Gross. Hold on. He's got one friend from Australia who has been consistently bringing his father to visit him. He's in a new relationship with a female, and she's just a breath of fresh air. She's educated, very successful, very stable. I'm not going to mention her name. She has no interest in publicity. So she is just a gift, and so is the friend from Australia. I'm not going to mention their names, but he's doing quite well considering he's been wrongfully convicted twice. Hi, Joyce. But he's definitely got these very loyal people who have helped him get through this, unquote. Meanwhile, across the state border in Illinois, Zellner remained committed to uncovering the truth. One of her strongest attributes is her patience. She has an uncanny ability to remain even-keeled, to stay the course, to not get frustrated, even after a post-conviction ruling does not go her way. Because Avery's case had garnered international prominence, Zellner had encountered her share of online critics who have wanted her to fail. On the other hand, there are ordinary people out there who simply seek the truth. People who did not know Stephen Avery or Kathleen Zellner at the time of Making a Murderer. One was a man who moved to Colorado. His name was Tom Sawinski. At the time of the Halbach murder in 2005, Sawinski had lived in Manitowoc County for more than 20 years. He used his trusty four-door sedan, tan and gold, to bring people their daily newspaper. Sawinski worked as a motor route carrier for Gannett, Wisconsin Media, parent company of USA Today, and owners of 10 daily newspapers across Wisconsin at that time, including the Herald Times Reporter in Manitowoc. For Sawinski, most of his early morning newspaper deliveries were dull and uneventful. Every so often, Sawinski might encounter deer darting across the highway or see the flashing red and blue lights of a police car speeding to an emergency. For Sawinski, the early morning events of November 5, 2005, stayed on his mind for several years. As the years went by, he wondered to himself, did he, of all people, possess the key to unlock one of the biggest clues surrounding the Teresa Halbach murder mystery? Hello, Susie. While most of Manitowoc County's citizens remained comfortably asleep in their beds, Sawinski's newspaper delivery route put him near Avery Auto Salvage for what became a scary, unforgettable encounter. Before sunrise, Sawinski steered his sedan along State Highway 147. Then he turned left, bringing him down Avery Road. Quote, soon after I turned onto Avery Road, I witnessed an individual who I later realized was Bobby Dassey and another unidentified older male pushing a dark blue RAV4 down Avery Road on the right side towards the junkyard, unquote, Sawinski recalled in his affidavit. Quote, Bobby Dassey was shirtless, even though it was early November. The second man appeared to be in his 50s or early 60s, had a long gray beard, was wearing a worn, puffy jacket, had a larger frame, and was around 6 feet in height. The RAV4 did not have its lights on, Sawinski remembered. I drove down Avery Road towards the mailboxes, left the Herald Times in the mailbox, and turned around. I felt very afraid as I approached the two individuals because Bobby Dassey attempted to step in front of my car, blocking my exit. I was within 5 feet of Bobby Dassey, and my headlights were on the entire time. The older man ducked down behind the open passenger door. I swerved to the right and drove in the shallow ditch to avoid hitting Bobby Dassey. I called out, "Paper boy, gotta go," because I was afraid for my safety, unquote. Sawinski's encounter with Bobby Dassey took place hours before the police made the Avery salvage yard the focus of their murder investigation for the next several days. Quote, Bobby Dassey looked me in the eye, and I could tell with the look in his eyes that he was not happy to see me there, Sawinski noted. I knew that Bobby Dassey and the older individual were doing something creepy, unquote. Unbeknownst to Sawinski, Halbach's RAV4 would be discovered later that Saturday morning. Someone had even covered it with several boards, not necessarily to hide it, but to make it easy for someone to discover the car. And sure enough, when the mother-daughter volunteer search party members, Pamela Sturm and daughter Nicole, arrived mid-morning, they quickly found the RAV4 along the outer ridge of Avery salvage yard. Quote, after I learned that Teresa Halbach's car was found on November 5, 2005, I contacted the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office and spoke with a female officer, Sawinski remembered. I reported everything I have stated in this affidavit to the officer. The officer said, we already know who did it. I provided my phone number and they said they would contact me soon. I never heard back from the police, unquote. 10 years later, in December 2015, Sawinski joined millions of people across the globe immersing themselves in the brand new 10-part true crime Netflix documentary, Making a Murderer. After watching season 1 of Making a Murderer, I contacted Avery's trial attorneys to inform them of what I saw and never heard back. Nothing has been promised or given to me in exchange for this affidavit, unquote, Sawinski declared. In December 2022, as her 7th year of legal representation of Avery drew to a close, Zellner filed a 51-page motion for post-conviction relief with Manitowoc County. Of note, Sawinski, her new witness, now provided her with a direct connection between Bobby Dassey and Teresa Halbach's murder. Moreover, Zellner informed the Wisconsin courts that Sawinski had not contacted Avery's original criminal defense lawyers, Jerry Buting and Dean Strang, as he originally believed and stated in his affidavit. Actually, Zellner discovered he had emailed the New York-based Innocence Project in 2016 after watching Making a Murderer Season 1. Consequently, Sawinski's email to the Innocence Project did not get passed along to Avery's lawyers. In fact, Sawinski's first attempt at contacting Zellner happened in December 2020, a full 3 years after Avery already filed his second post-conviction motion. Quote, further, Mr. Sawinski's memory was refreshed with a recorded dispatch that was recently discovered in that he made the call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office on November 6, 2006. Zellner's December 2022 filing declared. The Sawinski evidence provided by Mr. Sawinski to Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel is newly discovered evidence, which provides the missing direct connection between Bobby and Ms. Halbach's murder, making him a Denny suspect. Of importance, Avery did not have the Sawinski evidence until Tom Sawinski came forward to Zellner's law firm in April 2021. Quote, rather, the Sawinski evidence was reported to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office by Mr. Sawinski, but the evidence was suppressed from Mr. Avery by the prosecution. Zellner reminded Wisconsin's post-conviction judge. Neither Mr. Avery nor his counsel were on notice that Mr. Sawinski had any knowledge about Bobby's actions on November 5, 2005. The Sawinski evidence is material to several issues in Mr. Avery's case. Most importantly, it is material for establishing Mr. Avery's defense, that is, that a third party committed the crime against Ms. Halbach. It is material for establishing the direct link to Bobby as a third-party Denny suspect and to opening the door to reconsidering the Veli CD as establishing a sexual motive for the murder. Additionally, the Sawinski evidence is material to the evidence in the RAV4 being planted by Bobby, including Mr. Avery's blood and DNA. The RAV4 also contained the Halbach vehicle key and Ms. Halbach's electronic devices, which were discovered in Mr. Avery's bedroom and burn barrel, respectively. Next, Zellner's December 2022 filing detailed how the Sawinski evidence impeaches Bobby Dassey's murder trial testimony. Taking the witness stand for the prosecution, Bobby Dassey suggested Halbach never left the Avery property, that he last saw her walking toward Avery's red trailer. Quote, Bobby's testimony was the most determinative of Mr. Avery's guilt because the state used it to establish that Ms. Halbach never left the Avery property alive, unquote, Zellner emphasized. On the witness stand, Prosecutor Kratz asked Bobby Dassey, quote, after seeing this woman walking toward your Uncle Stevens, did you ever see this woman again? No, unquote, Bobby told the courtroom. To prevail on a Denny motion, defense lawyers must persuade the judge the third party had motive, opportunity, and a direct connection to the crime. Law enforcement considered pornography as evidence of motive in Ms. Halbach's murder, unquote, Zellner pointed out in her filing. Did I skip a page? No, I didn't. Okay. Quote, the clear working theory of the investigators was that the murder of Ms. Halbach was motivated by sexual assault. Pursuant to that theory, the Dassey computer was seized by law enforcement on April 21, 2006, unquote. According to Zellner, quote, there is sufficient evidence that it was only Bobby who had access to the Dassey computer during the day on weekdays between approximately 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Moreover, 128 searches for the most violent porn images primarily occurred on weekdays when only Bobby was in the Dassey residence. It is undisputed that Mr. Avery never accessed the Dassey computer. He did not have the password for the Dassey computer, nor did he possess a key to the Dassey residence, which was locked when no one was home. The only time Mr. Avery ever entered the Dassey residence was when one of the Dassey family members was home. The depicted acts in the violent pornography that Bobby was viewing are sufficiently similar to the violent murder of Ms. Halbach. The evidence of Bobby's searches for violent pornographic images is not so remote in time as to be inadmissible, but rather so close in time to Ms. Halbach's murder that the searches are direct evidence of Bobby's motive to kill Ms. Halbach. The Sawinski evidence greatly strengthens the opportunity argument because Bobby is in possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle where her murder likely occurred. The vehicle is a key of evidence in the crime. The new evidence that Ms. Halbach's vehicle was returned to the Avery salvage yard from a different location is corroborated by the fact that a witness saw a vehicle similar to Halbach's leave the property on October 31. In Mr. Avery's trial, Mr. Lurquin, a propane driver, testified he saw a green mid-size SUV leaving the Avery salvage yard driving towards Highway 147 between 3:30 and 4 p.m. on October 31. He informed law enforcement about this when he was stopped at a roadblock a few days later and had heard about the news of Ms. Halbach being missing, unquote. One of the most interesting developments from Zellner's investigative legwork on Avery's behalf has been her focus on some of the figures who remained in the shadows. One such person was Michael Osmundson, an avid hunter and close friend of Bobby Dassey, who was a nearby resident of Mishicot. According to Zellner, Bobby Dassey was with Michael Osmundson when Halbach's vehicle was discovered at the Avery salvage yard party on November 5, 2005. Zellner's post-conviction filing noted that her investigator met with and interviewed Osmundson about whether he was the person with Bobby pushing the RAV4 onto the Avery salvage yard. According to Zellner, the interview was necessary because Osmundson fit the height, weight, and beard description provided by Mr. Sawinski of the person helping Bobby push the car. Quote, when Osmundson was asked if he was the person who helped Bobby push the vehicle on the Avery property on November 5, 2005, Osmundson responded he, quote, could not remember, unquote, if he was that individual, end quote. Zellner's December 2022 post-conviction filing revealed. He can't remember. Osmond said something else to the Wisconsin police that drew scrutiny from Zellner as her legal team had dug into the Manitowoc County murder mystery several years later. Back in 2005, Halbach's mother first reported her daughter as missing on November 3. Quote, remarkably, Osmundson stated to law enforcement that he first learned about the missing girl on Tuesday, November 1, 2005, when Halbach had not yet been reported missing, unquote, Zellner pointed out. Quote, further, the record reveals that Osmundson and Bobby were either suspiciously calling each other repeatedly or with each other at relevant times after Ms. Halbach's murder. Bobby's phone records reflect that on October 31, 2005, there were 7 phone calls between Bobby and Osmundson occurring between the following times in the morning and evening: 6:12 a.m., 6:36, 3:56 p.m., 3:57, 4:53, 5:10, and 6:01. Bobby's phone records revealed that Bobby called Osmundson a total of 66 times from October 24, 2005 to November 9, 2005, unquote. Avery was arrested on November 9, 2005. Quote, if Bobby is established as a viable third-party Denny suspect, the forensic evidence in the case is completely undermined, Zellner implored the court. The newly discovered evidence that Bobby was in possession of Ms. Halbach's vehicle means that he had opportunity and access to plant evidence in the vehicle and from the vehicle. Because Bobby has been directly linked to the murder of Ms. Halbach, there is a reasonable inference that he planted the bones in Mr. Avery's burn pit. This new evidence creates a reasonable probability that had the jury heard the new evidence, it would have had a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. Therefore, Mr. Avery should be granted a new trial. Unquote. Not only was the Sawinski evidence newly discovered, Zellner argued it signified a monumental Brady violation by the prosecution. As outlined back in chapter 26, and you'll have to buy the book to go read chapter 26 for yourself, American prosecutors have a duty to share certain evidence with the defense, including evidence favorable to the defendant. And from Zellner's perspective, she also needed to investigate the veracity of Sawinski's information. Avery's lawyer wanted to be absolutely positive Sawinski's credibility was in check. After all, there were all sorts of scam artists trying to make a name for themselves by cashing in on the making a murderer hysteria. Zellner needed to find out whether Sawinski was nothing but a glory seeker. She directed one of her law firm's private investigators, Stephen Kirby, to conduct a thorough background probe of Sawinski. As part of his research, Kirby obtained Sawinski's date of birth, relatives, employment history, phone numbers, and email addresses. Kirby researched Sawinski for any civil and criminal court cases, plus his ownership history for homes and automobiles. Indeed, financial records obtained by Zellner's private investigator from the Wisconsin newspaper confirmed Sawinski worked as a carrier in 2005 and 2006 for the Herald Times reporter. After confirming Sawinski's work history, Kirby's background check led him to connect Avery's original criminal defense lawyers, or to contact. Quote, Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel contact Mr. Avery's trial defense counsel, Mr. Buting, who confirmed that Mr. Avery's trial counsel had not received any emails from Mr. Sawinski, unquote. Zellner's post-conviction filing alerted the judge. The world-famous wrongful conviction lawyer and her staff undertook a rigorous review of all the discovery materials, along with any prior Freedom of Information Act materials or requests made to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office pertaining to Avery's murder case. Once again, they came up empty. Avery's lawyers uncovered no information in regard to Sawinski and his claim of speaking with Manitowoc Sheriff's officials back in 2005. As for Sawinski, he had moved to Denver, Colorado by 2021. That spring, he received a certified letter notifying him to contact Zellner immediately. From there, Sawinski called Avery's lawyer, and her private investigator arranged for a face-to-face interview on April 10, 2021. 2 days later, Zellner had the Sawinski affidavit notarized for the court. Quote, the affidavit described the evidence Mr. Sawinski reported to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office about what he observed on the Avery property while delivering newspapers on November 5, 2005, as well as the actions he took afterwards. His affidavit included a map indicating where he observed the two males pushing the RAV4, unquote, Zellner's motion stated. By August 28, 2021, Zellner had listened to all of her law enforcement audio recordings from Avery's case. She found no recording that matched the description of events provided by the former Manitowoc newspaper carrier. Not ready to give up on her quest for that elusive information, Zellner submitted 3 new Freedom of Information Act requests to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Joint Dispatch Center on March 15, 2022. She focused on the agency's audio recordings from 12:01 a.m. November 3, 2005 through 11:59 p.m. on November 9, 2005. By May 3, 2022, the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office complied with Zellner's information request. Quote, for the first time, the time and date of the calls were revealed on the track files, unquote, Zellner's filing declared. Contained within the numerous audio calls was one made at 10:28 p.m. on November 6, 2005. That particular call captured Zellner's attention. Armed with the newly discovered evidence, private investigator Stephen Kirby tracked down Sawinski's former girlfriend, Devin Novak, for an interview. On August 6, 2022, Novak identified the voice on the recorded call to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office as being Tom Sawinski's voice. Later, Kirby met with Sawinski and played the audio recording for him. Sawinski recognized the voice as being his own. Quote, Mr. Sawinski provided Mr. Avery's current post-conviction counsel with an affidavit regarding his voice identification, unquote, Zellner's December 2022 filing declared. As Zellner pointed out for the judge, Avery's conviction for first-degree intentional homicide was largely based on his trial defense counsel's unsuccessful efforts to name a third-party Denny suspect that met all the Denny requirements. Quote, the Sawinski new and material evidence was suppressed when the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office failed to disclose the November 6, 2005, 10:28 p.m. audio recording pursuant to defense discovery requests, unquote, Zellner argued in her appeal. Quote, the disclosure of the audio recording would have led to the identification of Mr. Sawinski and the evidence he has provided, which directly connects Bobby to the murder and the framing of Mr. Avery. The Sawinski evidence also impeaches Bobby's testimony and refutes the state's theory that Ms. Halbach's RAV4 never left the Avery property and that Mr. Avery was the last person to see Ms. Halbach alive. Further, materially favorable evidence not only includes exculpatory evidence, but also evidence that is impeaching a prosecution witness, unquote. In closing, Zellner's December 6, 2022 post-conviction relief motion asked Wisconsin Judge Angela Suckowitz to grant Avery an evidentiary hearing or a new trial, quote, and all relief this court deems appropriate, unquote. As of 2023, Suckowitz had served as a Sheboygan County judge since 2010. On August 22, 2023, Judge Suckowitz issued her 31-page ruling. To her, the newspaper delivery driver seeing Bobby Dassey and someone else pushing murder victim Halbach's RAV4 along Avery Road was not important enough to grant Avery a new trial or even an evidentiary hearing in the judge's courtroom. That's disgusting. The judge's ruling left Wisconsin's political establishment breathing a sigh of relief. Influential Democrats and Republicans throughout the Wisconsin government were counting on Suckowitz to rule against Avery. Wisconsin's politicians and its judiciary were thoroughly embarrassed by their state's portrayal during both seasons of Making a Murderer in 2015 and 2018. If Judge Suckowitz ruled in Zellner's favor, the judge realized she would, in effect, leave the barn door wide open for Making a Murderer filmmakers Moira Demos and Laura Riccardi to make yet another trip back to the Dairy State. By 2023, the last thing Wisconsin's powerful establishment wanted was for the Emmy Award-winning, internationally celebrated Making a Murderer film producers to release a season 3. For that reason, Wisconsin politicians had put their faith and trust in the middle-aged Suckowitz. They considered her their sacred goalkeeper. For Wisconsin's mighty political bureaucracy, the strength of Zellner's newly discovered evidence needed to be treated as irrelevant, and the judge from Sheboygan was expected to treat her courtroom gavel like it was a fly swatter. Avery, the condemned prisoner from Manitowoc County, and Zellner, his celebrity status exoneration lawyer from Illinois, were considered obnoxious insects in the eyes of Wisconsin's justice system. However, for judges like Angela Suckowitz, it seemed as if Zellner would not make like a bee and buzz off, no matter how many times a fly swatter was waved in her direction. Finally, on August 22, 2023, with the weight of Wisconsin's justice system resting on her broad shoulders, Angela Suckowitz released her highly anticipated ruling on Avery's latest post-conviction motion. The ruling consisted of 31 pages, of which more than half rehashed the crime's background and other chronology. Hello, Christine from Two Rivers. If you were an avid Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey supporter, the judge's ruling was like finding all four of your vehicle's tires deflated in the driveway. Um, I mean that's true, but also not true because we all expect that from Judge Flowers. I would think you hope for the best, but expect the worst. Um, Perhaps most frustrating, the longtime Sheboygan judge continued to mess up important relevant facts of Halbach's murder, as the judge also inexplicably listed the wrong names of key people in her ruling. For instance, one of the biggest question marks facing the prosecution concerned the fact that several of Halbach's charred bones were discovered inside Bobby Dassey's burn barrel near his red. Wait, sorry. That particular barrel was kept on the Dassey family property, not part of Stephen Avery's yard. Avery had his own burn barrel near his red mobile home trailer, but Halbach's bones were not found inside it. And yet, Judge Suckowitz got this basic fact wrong in her ruling, as she wrongly characterized Halbach's bones as being found inside Avery's burn barrel rather than Bobby Dassey's burn barrel. In her August 22, 2023 decision, when Sutkowitz wrote, quote, the defense argues that Mr. Dassey's possession of the RAV4 also provided to him access to the key to the victim's car found in the defendant's home, as well as the victim's electronics found in the burn barrel, along with the victim's remains, unquote. Then on page 20, the Wisconsin judge incorrectly labeled the names of the Dassey brothers when she wrote, quote, no physical evidence directly linking Brian Dassey, Brian isn't spelled correctly because it's spelled with an I and Brian Dassey is a Y, to the homicide was found in the house, unquote. If you analyze the rest of the judge's ruling carefully, you will notice that Suckowitz treats the prosecution's evidence as ironclad truth. Page 12 of Suckowitz's ruling, quote, the state argues that the defendant has fallen short of establishing that Bobby Dassey was, in fact, the person who conducted the computer searches in question, or that the searches conducted were probative or relevant to prove that anyone had motive to commit murder in October of 2005, unquote. Page 13, quote, the state notes that there are no citations to any facts of record establishing Mr. Dassey's whereabouts at the time the searches were conducted, or any evidence that conclusively establishes that no other person had access to the home or computer at the time in question, unquote. Also, page 13, quote, the state further disputes the defendant's conclusions that law enforcement considered pornography or sexual assault as a motive for the murder in this matter, unquote. Page 15, quote, assuming, for the purposes of this motion, that those 3 searches were conducted by Bobby Dassey, the state argues that a mere 3 searches conducted prior to the murder of Ms. Halbach failed to demonstrate that Mr. Dassey was a voracious consumer of violent pornography prior to the murder, thus failing to establish that theory of motive offered by the defendant, unquote. Page 16, quote, the state further states that the images and search results from the Dassey computer did not directly mirror the manner in which the victim was killed. The state notes that the evidence offered by the defendant as proof of motive cannot be proved to have been obtained by or have been in the sole possession of Bobby Dassey, unquote. Page 18, quote, the defendant rests his motive argument on the premise that Bobby Dassey had an obsession with violent sexual pornography involving young women and a fascination with gruesome homicides and deaths. However, the defendant's arguments are not reported by the evidence submitted. The defendant could have offered a witness who saw Mr. Dassey actually conducting any of the searches in question. Even more simply, the defendant could have offered evidence that the defendant was actually home at the time of the searches, rather than speculation based on typical schedules of the family to prove that Mr. Dassey conducted the searches, unquote. Page 20, quote, no search results offered by the defendant directly mirror the elements of the crime in this case. There is no evidence, only generalized assumptions, that Bobby Dassey was the individual who conducted the searches on the family computer. The computer was not in the exclusive possession of Bobby Dassey prior to or after the murder. Only a very small number of searches were conducted prior to the murder of Ms. Halbach. Unquote. Despite several of Halbach's bones being inside Bobby Dassey's burn barrel, and that Zellner introduced two new witnesses, Tom Sawinski, who saw Bobby Dassey pushing the victim's vehicle several hours before it was found, Judge Suckowitz made this declaration in her August 2023 ruling. Page 20, quote, "The defendant has not met the burden under Denny to establish that Bobby Dassey had motive to commit the crime alleged and, as such, failed to meet the burden to admit the evidence offered to prove the existence of a third party for the commission of this crime." Unquote. Page 22, quote, "The state goes on to argue that the defendant has offered no evidence to establish that Bobby had the necessary skills available to manipulate the evidence in a manner that would implicate the defendant. The state notes at the time of the murder, Bobby Dassey was an 18-year-old high school graduate. Yay, he graduated high school. Brendan didn't get that chance. Mr. Dassey was employed as a third shift worker at a furniture factory. The state posits that there is no evidence of record that establishes how an individual of Bobby's age and experience would have obtained the scientific knowledge or skill to collect, transport, and plant the defendant's blood from his bathroom." Unquote. On the other hand, Judge Suckowitz was unimpressed with the discovery of Zellner's two new witnesses, in spite of the fact that both men independently put Halbach's RAV4 in the control of Bobby Dassey after her disappearance. Page 25, quote, "Finally, the defendant asserts that the Sawinski affidavit supplies a direct connection between Bobby and the murder of Ms. Halbach. The defendant asserts that because Bobby was in possession of the victim's RAV4, it proves that he had access to the key to the defendant's car and her electronics that were found in the burn pit. These items are links that are central to proving Bobby Dassey's involvement in the murder of Ms. Halbach. The defendant argues that Bobby's possession of the car provides a direct evidentiary link between Bobby and the crime committed, making him a viable third-party suspect. Even if Bobby was found in the possession of the victim's automobile on the night of November 5, 2005, there is only speculation and no evidence to prove that Bobby was in possession of the car or that he had exclusive control over the vehicle prior to that night." Unquote. Let me put this book down for a second. Take a drink of water. And then start spouting a little bit. Then how did you convict Stephen Avery? You're convicting Stephen on Bobby's testimony that he saw her walking towards Stephen's trailer. So if you're going to claim these witnesses that Kathleen Zellner has now as hearsay or whatever, not believable because there's no proof other than just what they say, why are Bobby's words taken as fact? And if you're going to convict Stephen because of things found at his home, well, things were found at the Dassey home too, because the Dassey burn barrel. So I'm not understanding how you can say one is ridiculous, but then convicting somebody for the same thing. Let me go back. Page 26, quote, the defendant further asserts that Bobby's possession of the car gave him access to the victim's car keys. Oh, and let me say too, going, Daniel, who are you saying done it? Because if you're saying Stephen did it, this is where we say goodbye. So Bobby's testimony is seeing Teresa Hallbach there to take a picture of his mom's car, and that is walking towards his trailer. We don't know if she went anywhere else afterwards. Don't know. Right? But then there's witnesses who see Bobby with her car. And you're now going to claim that that's not suspicious of Bobby. It's more suspicious that Stephen made an appointment with Auto Trader instead of calling her directly, leaving a paper trail to have some woman that people knew were coming to his house, and he's had come to his house a bunch of times, that he's gonna murder this girl when he's about to come into a couple $100,000, and depositions had started on his multi-million-dollar lawsuit, that he's gonna, so you're gonna say that her walking towards his house, which Bobby, at least according to his mommy Barb, has said that he didn't see her do that and saw her actually leave, and that he lied on the stand. So that all, Stephen looks more suspicious than Bobby pushing her car onto the salvage yard property in the middle of the night. Okay. Again, this is speculation by the defendant. Mr. Sawinski's affidavit does not mention seeing Bobby with the key to the victim's car. You don't need the key to the car. People who work in a junkyard are going to know how to get into a car and to make a car run if need be. In fact, the affidavit establishes that Bobby was pushing the victim's car without power on the night in question. Yeah, so nobody would see it or hear it. Placing doubt on whether he was in possession of the victim's car key. No, that's your assumption. The victim's key and electronics could have been taken directly from the victim or taken from her car at any time prior to or after the murder by another individual long before the auto was in Bobby's possession. There is no evidence of record taken from the car that links Bobby directly to the actual homicide of Ms. Hallbach, unquote. Where's the evidence that Stephen murdered her? Page 27, quote, while the defendant asserts that the only logical conclusion to be drawn from Bobby's possession of the vehicle that night is that Bobby is the individual who actually murdered Ms. Hallbach, this assumption is flawed. There are other reasons that Bobby could have been in possession of the car that night, including that Bobby was trying to help hide evidence to protect the two individuals directly linked by forensic evidence to this murder and convicted of the crime. The defendant's conclusory assumptions drawn from the evidence offered in the affidavit do not amount to evidence directly linking Bobby to the homicide itself. As such, the defendant failed to meet the final standard of the Denny test to establish Bobby as a valid third-party suspect in the crime, unquote. So happy she's gone. Say what you want about now retired Manitowoc County Judge Patrick Willis, the judge who presided over Avery's sensational murder trial in 2007. Sorry, I just noticed from washing my hands, my watch cover, there was water in between my watch cover and my watch. Squirrel. and later declared at the sentencing that Avery was the most dangerous man who ever set foot in his courtroom. Unknown to most people, Willis actually took the initiative to properly research the evidence brought forward against Avery's mentally impaired teenage nephew, Brendan Dassey, who was tried and convicted by a jury in a case assigned to a different Manitowoc judge, Jerome Fox. Like millions of people who watched Brendan Dassey's videotaped interrogation and purported confession during Making a Murderer, Judge Willis also watched the videotapes himself. Back around 2007, and the Manitowoc judge had major problems with them, so much so that Judge Willis composed a written note entered into Avery's voluminous court file, informing anyone inspecting the court file that, quote, the physical evidence and forensic evidence introduced at Mr. Avery's trial failed to provide corroborating support for a number of the allegations attributed to Mr. Dassey, unquote. As one significant example, Avery's sentencing judge wrote, quote, there was no physical or scientific evidence demonstrating that Teresa Halbach was ever present in Mr. Avery's trailer, unquote. Fast forward 16 years to the summer of 2023. The judge from Sheboygan assigned to replace Patrick Willis for handling Avery's post-conviction appeals, Angie Sukowitz, struggled to come up with legitimate reasons to deny Avery an evidentiary hearing or a new trial. Then, upon further reflection, the judge had an idea. She would cite the Brendan Dassey confession to justify her decision in the Avery case. It's so frustrating. I know we've been over all this stuff already, but it's so frustrating to have to think of this crap again. Page 24. Quote, the defendant further failed to offer any facts or of record to establish a consistent plan to frame the defendant or any theory including or excluding law enforcement involvement which implicates the defendant in this crime, unquote, Sukowitz opined. Quote, the defendant's theory that Bobby framed him for this murder also fails to acknowledge a significant fact in relation to this crime, to which Brendan Dassey confessed and was convicted of participating in the murder of Ms. Halbach, which wasn't used in Stephen's trial. Brendan specifically implicated the defendant in this crime, and his conviction has been affirmed by the appellate courts and remains of record. All of the allegations implicating Bobby in the murder and the framing of the defendant are pure speculation and are not supported by any evidence submitted by the defendant. As such, the defendant failed to satisfy the tests in Edmonds, Denny, and Wilson, unquote. On May 26, 2023, Zellner submitted another affidavit for Avery's appeal from someone who previously never stepped forward. Zellner notified Wisconsin's judiciary system she just became aware of Tom Barash on May 10, 2023. His observations concerned Halbach's RAV4 during the late night hours of Friday, November 4, 2005, or early morning hours of Saturday, November 5, 2005. Quote, Mr. Thomas Barash corroborates the previously filed affidavit of Thomas Sawinski that Bobby Dassey was driving the RAV4 vehicle of Teresa Halbach on Friday night, November 4, 2005, or early Saturday morning after her disappearance on October 31, 2005, unquote, Zellner declared. According to the May 24, 2023 affidavit, Tom Barash indicated that back in 2005, he worked as a self-employed repossession agent. He remembered that sometime before 2 a.m. on Saturday, November 5, 2005, Barash was driving his tow truck to repossess a vehicle in rural Manitowoc County near the tiny town of Larrabee. He was in the area of State Highway 147 and County Road Q in Manitowoc County. Quote, I noticed a vehicle in the park and ride on highways 147 and 43 that had just struck a deer and had broken a headlight, unquote, Barash remarked. Quote, I gave the driver a roll of duct tape to repair the car. After that, I was driving down Highway 147 and made a wrong turn to go south on County Road Q. After I realized my mistake, I turned around and was heading back north. As I was heading back north, I noticed a RAV4 driving south on County Road Q. The RAV4 turned left off of County Road Q after it passed me. I noticed the RAV4 because it was unusual to see any other cars out on the road at that time of night. Unquote. As for his tow truck, Brush recalled it had bright illuminating lights. The bright lights illuminated the oncoming RAV4, and that allowed Brush to see the people inside the vehicle as it passed him. On that particular night, Brush recalled he had another helper with him inside his tow truck who also saw the oncoming RAV4. The man's name was Mike, and Mike has since died. Anyway, Baresh remembered that in either 2006 or 2007, he was watching the television news coverage of Avery's murder trial, and that's when he noticed Bobby Dassey in the courtroom. Baresh remembered how he had seen Bobby Dassey driving the RAV4 during the late night hours of 2005. In his 2023 affidavit, Baresh acknowledged he was no saint. He had his share of ups and downs in life, and in November 2006, he found himself in Green Bay at the Brown County Jail, facing a domestic violence charge. Then in February 2007, he was back in jail, accused of bail jumping. Quote, "During the time I was incarcerated, I told a Brown County detective that I had information about the Halbach murder, but was ignored and told that, quote, I was already in enough trouble and to shut up," unquote, Baresh noted. To this day, Baresh said he cannot identify the passengers seated inside the RAV4 following Halbach's disappearance. Quote, "But I'm 100% sure it was not Stephen Avery," he insisted. In 2017 or 2018, I told my brother Ron about my observation of the RAV4 back in 2005. I do not know any of the Avery or Dassey family members personally, but I may have dropped towed vehicles at the Avery salvage yard on a few occasions. I believe I've encountered Stephen Avery on one occasion at a local McDonald's, but did not converse with him, unquote. Lastly, Baresh was asked by Zellner's associates whether he knew a man named Mike Osmondson. Quote, "I do not know Mike Osmondson," Baresh declared. "Nothing has been promised or given to me in exchange for this affidavit," unquote. In the end, Judge Suckwitz was not persuaded to give much weight to Baresh's affidavit either. Page 29, quote, "Once again, assuming for the purposes of this motion that the facts in the Baresh affidavit were true, the facts do not directly link Bobby Dassey with the murder of Ms. Halbach. The affidavit asserts that two people were in the car when it was seen driving down the road. While Mr. Baresh states that he can conclusively identify Bobby Dassey in the car, he cannot identify the other individual in the car other than to eliminate the person being the defendant. Once again, the affidavit links Bobby Dassey to being in possession of the RAV4 after the homicide took place. There is nothing in the affidavit that establishes that Bobby had possession or conclusive possession of the vehicle prior to that time. The affidavit does not establish that Bobby was the individual who was in possession of the key to the car or the car itself prior to that night. The affidavit, only taken as true, establishes that Bobby was in possession of the car on November 4th or 5th, unquote. The judge went on to add, quote, "Nothing in this statement links Bobby to the homicide itself. One would have to leap to the conclusion that if he were in possession of the RAV4 that night, he might be the individual who committed the murder. As previously discussed, no direct evidence in this matter links Bobby directly to the murder. Furthermore, in this affidavit, a new unnamed individual could be implicated as the murderer in this case under the theory offered by the defendant. The unnamed individual had equal access to the car and the key on that night in question. That individual could have been the individual who, if the defense theory is correct, could have moved the car back and forth from the property, removed the personal electronics from the car, possessed the key, and then planted it at the defendant's home. As such, the affidavit offered also fails the test in Denny to be admissible to prove the existence of a third party suspect for this crime. Unquote. On August 22, 2023, the last 13 words of her 31-page ruling, all typed in capital letters, felt like a bee sting for many Making a Murderer fans who maintain faith in America's justice system. Who has faith in our system? Avery supporters had clung to the hope that, in an act of fairness, Judge Suckowitz would grant Zellner the chance to argue her client's case inside her Wisconsin courtroom. There, the television news cameras could chronicle the testimony and those being summoned to the witness stand. Instead, they got stuck with this quote, in all capitals, for the reasons set forth above, the motion of the defendant is denied. Unquote. Not only was the word denied in capital letters, the judge made sure to type it in bold. At the time of my interview with Zellner on September 29, 2023, more than a month had passed since her post-conviction motion was turned down by the judge in northeastern Wisconsin. No question in my quote, no question in my mind, if we were in Illinois, we would have had an evidentiary hearing several years ago, Zellner remarked. We would have had a full court analysis and witnesses of all the evidence. It would have gone much more smoothly. There's tremendous fear in Wisconsin of being exposed. I think that Making a Murderer had that effect. And so the name of the game with the rulings that we've gotten so far is that no one wants us back in court. I think anywhere else we would have gotten a hearing, but we will just be persistent because there is no statute of limitations on this. Stephen Avery's got many, many more chances to get out. Unquote. Hi, Kim. I'm torn on that because Kathleen represents Melissa Kaluzinski, who she's not getting anything. Nothing's happening on Melissa's case for years and years and years. Nothing is happening with Melissa, and that's Illinois. But on the other hand, Marnie. Hold on. Where's my picture of Marnie? Oh. Really? Is it going to be like the last picture in here? Marnie Yang. We're getting an evidentiary hearing for her, finally. She's been in prison 15 years now. And that's also Illinois, and the same exact people involved from Melissa's case. But Marnie has a different attorney, does not have Zellner. So I don't think it's a Wisconsin thing. I think it's our system thing and an ego thing when it comes to judges. Like, when I went to Brendan's evidentiary hearing here in Chicago, I was wearing my Brendan Dassey sweatshirt, and one of his attorneys, Stephen Drizzen, asked me to take it off because he said the judge could get upset by it, by seeing somebody supporting Brendan in the courtroom. When I went to court for Kent Pellegrini, who was Kathleen Zellner was his attorney, we were told not to wear, because we had baby blue is Kent's favorite color, and so we would wear baby blue ribbons for Kent, and we were told not to have those on in the courtroom because it could cause the judge to go the other way. Judges have egos. Nobody wants to say they're wrong. Okay, what's going on here? Susie, is this person bothering you? Because calling somebody stupid, I mean, childish, and I'm not going to tolerate that. Um, okay, sorry. I'm thrown by that by not seeing all that's going on there, and I want to make sure somebody's not being harassed or whatever. Um, Hi Sherry. I know a whole bunch of judges now in Illinois, including two of our Illinois Supreme Court judges. And now the judges that I know personally are all good people. And I hope people get fair trials in their courtroom. Why, good day, Betty Jane. But I can't say this is a Wisconsin thing. This is an everywhere thing. Um all right. Back to where we were. Incidentally, 2 years earlier, I wrote an opinion column for Patch headlined, quote, "Is Making a Murderer 3 Preoccupying Wisconsin's Supreme Court?" Unquote. Quote, "In 30 years of doing post conviction work all over the United States, we have been granted evidentiary hearings in 99% of our cases." Unquote. I quoted Zellner as telling me in September 2021. Quote, "The other 1% were denied and then reversed on appeal." Not Melissa Kalyazinski. My question is, why is Wisconsin so fearful of having a public hearing about the integrity of this conviction? Thumbs up, Nana. Unquote. In my opinion column, I wrote that Avery's case may be all about Wisconsin's judiciary preventing a third season of Making a Murderer from airing on Netflix. I asked readers to step back for a moment and assess whether they thought the Wisconsin Supreme Court wanted to make the bold declaration that Stephen Avery was indeed the victim of not just one, but two state of Wisconsin wrongful convictions, both involving jury trials in front of Manitowoc County citizens. Furthermore, I asked whether the Wisconsin Supreme Court wants to fall out of favor with the rest of Wisconsin's politicians and bureaucrats by giving the producers of Making a Murderer enough raw footage to compile a third season, one certain to be more compelling and dramatic than the 2015 and 2018 seasons 1 and 2 combined. And then there's Wisconsin's legacy. A pronouncement of a second wrongful conviction for Avery would give Wisconsin the disgraceful distinction of being the only state in the country with such an embarrassing mark. Not true. Here in Illinois, we have so many wrongful convictions that have been overturned. The real reason why Avery may not ever get a courtroom evidentiary hearing, let alone a new murder trial, is because so many of Wisconsin's politicians, both Republicans and Democrats, public officials and law enforcement officials, retired and present day employees, have reached the conclusion that this Making a Murderer hysteria needs to come to an immediate crashing halt. In their minds, mighty Wisconsin cannot continue to be vilified and ostracized to the outside world by the likes of Netflix filmmakers Dimas and Riccardi ever again. A season 3 of Making a Murderer could certainly focus on Avery's inevitable second wrongful conviction lawsuit, one that would demand gigantic monetary compensation, like in the hundreds of millions of dollars. A multitude of Wisconsin insurance companies could be on the hook for an enormous amount of liability. Ask yourself, would these deep-pocketed insurance adjusters employed by the local and state government entities gleefully write Stephen Avery a check that makes him one of Wisconsin's richest residents to redress all the wrongs caused to him by the Badger State's criminal justice system? Shameless plug, a third season could be. There's so many other things that have happened in this case that Making a Murderer hasn't covered yet. There is so much drama around this case there's so much more they could do. Just saying. Um, mm, mm, mm. For Judge Suckowitz, along with Wisconsin's Court of Appeals and the state Supreme Court justices, the easiest way to halt any further movie production of Making a Murderer Season 3 is to make sure Avery and Zellner lose their post conviction appeals. It seems that in the eyes of Wisconsin's criminal justice system, there cannot and will not be a Making a Murderer Season 3. Convicting a murderer that came out should open the floodgates to a season 3. The prospect of new MAM episodes showing Stephen Avery smiling, hugging, and waving to his adoring fans as he walks out of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections for a second time in his life would upset many people who built their careers and professional reputations around the notion that Avery was a deviant, psychopathic killing monster. They might rather scale the top of the stadium lights at Green Bay's Lambeau Field, and leap to their deaths in the parking lot than be forced to endure a third season of Making a Murderer. And you don't have to be Demos and Riccardi to imagine the movie script. A jovial Avery returns to Manitowoc, and after acquiring a $100 million wrongful conviction settlement, the hero of Making a Murderer buys up the downtown buildings and businesses. Longtime Manitowoc restaurants and bars owned by the community's wealthy and well-to-do disappear overnight as Avery takes them over. In their place, Avery opens his own brand of steakhouses and seafood-themed supper clubs. And with tens of millions of dollars remaining in his bank account and little time to waste, the 61-year-old Avery decides to launch his own line of bourbon, brandy, and whiskey. He turns his family's 40-acre salvage yard into the Avery Road Distillery. The new tourist attraction draws people from all over the world for a chance to sip Avery's whiskey and pose for a photograph with the short, stubby, smiling man who became the face of the wrongful conviction movement, not just once, but twice. But before Stephen Avery's saga can have a happy ending distributed to the masses through the airing of Making a Murderer Season 3, he and his lawyer must remain determined and committed to the cause of freedom. As the alternative rock band U2 sang in their 1987 Joshua Tree album, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. One person convinced that Avery will not die behind the mighty concrete fortress operated by the Wisconsin Department of Corrections is his attorney. During the September 2023 interview, Zellner remarked, quote, I do think we will win the appeal because I think the judge has made a number of errors. One of the things that's just perplexing to me is her lack of grasp of the facts. She actually thinks that Teresa Halbach's bones were in Stephen Avery's burn barrel, which, of course, is untrue. They were in the Dassey burn barrel. But she's made a number of legal errors on the case. She's applied the wrong standard for evaluating new evidence. She's applied the wrong evaluation for Denny. So we do think it will be overturned by the Court of Appeals. And we actually went back to her with this evidence because the Court of Appeals indicated, in their opinion 2 years ago, that the evidence could be very significant and we should revisit it with the lower court. So we did that. And is typical in many of these cases, the circuit court judges just don't have the knowledge a lot of times or experience with post-conviction work. Usually, if there's relief granted to the inmate, it's going to be from a higher court. So Stephen Avery has years to go on his appeals, unlike Brendan Dassey, whose case is pretty much finished. Unquote. Just when it seemed Zellner and Avery's luck had run out, they caught an unexpected and pleasant surprise. Judge Suckowitz came up with a caseload excuse as a justification for the courts to take Avery's case off of her docket. The official announcement came during the work week on Friday, October 26, 2023. Quote, Big Avery news, unquote, Zellner shared with her 737,000 Twitter followers. We've got 230,000 here. Quote, case is going to be reassigned to a new judge in Manitowoc. No objection in all capitals, unquote. Quote, there's no question she was aligned with the prosecution, and even in the most recent ruling in her post conviction motion, she is regurgitating the state's briefs, unquote. Zellner told this author on October 29, 2023. Quote, it's clear she wanted out of the case. Her biggest hope was not getting a new judge who has long-standing ties to the key police and public officials associated with Avery and Dassey's murder cases from 2005 to 2007. Avery's lawyer just wanted the next judge to be open minded and willing to analyze the evidence that she continues to uncover. Quote, and Suckowitz was aligned with Ken Kratz. The two of them served on state of Wisconsin committees together. She knew the state prosecutors, Zellner explained, so we'll have to see, unquote. All right, hold on one second. On Monday, October 30, 2023, Zellner learned that Avery's case would no longer be sent to a judge from neighboring Sheboygan County, an hour away. The newest judge on the bench for Manitowoc County, Judge Anthony Lambrecht, learned that he will handle Avery's post-conviction rulings from now on. Where is he at? I need to write that name down. Has anybody looked into this judge yet? Judge Anthony, and this pen's out of ink. Anthony Lambrecht. Okay. Learn that he will handle Avery's post-conviction rulings from now on. In 2023, Manitowoc County has added a Fourth Circuit judge for their downtown. So he'll still be in the Manitowoc County. And Lambrecht ran for the position unopposed in the spring. During an April 2023 interview with the Herald Times reporter, Lambrecht said he began his career as a police officer, and after nearly 6 years in law enforcement, he chose to pursue a career in law. After he became an attorney, he worked in Manitowoc at the Wisconsin State Public Defender's Office. Before he ran for Manitowoc County Judge, Lambrecht served as an assistant district attorney for Manitowoc. Quote, I think it's really all prepared me for kind of a unique insight into the role of judge, unquote, Lambrecht told Manitowoc's newspaper 6 months before Avery's case became his. Quote, of course, it's not all criminal law, but a majority of what judges in Manitowoc County deal with involves criminal law. I think those roles have prepared me well, unquote. How much longer is this? Holy cow. Got like 30 pages to go. Zellner's key message for her admirers and followers all over the world is to realize that she still has plenty of avenues and paths to pursue as she works to bring Avery home from prison, a free and innocent man. She remains focused on determining more facts and details surrounding the mysterious death of Halbach, the 25-year-old photographer. Zellner said she is not convinced Halbach actually died on October 31, 2005. Quote, she could have been tied up and held somewhere as a hostage, unquote, Zellner suggested recently. Quote, no one really knows when she was murdered. There's this huge window. She could have been alive even after Bobby was seen in her RAV4. There's all those abandoned houses out there. The truth was Teresa Halbach was into pretty dangerous boudoir photography, and she had some very strange relationships. She had someone calling her all the time, and the person would always hang up, and the cops never figured that out. She was not afraid of Stephen Avery, and she seemed to know who this stalker was, and she was afraid of this person. She never thought it was Stephen Avery, and she would have told Tom Pierce, and that wasn't the case, unquote. Avery's lawyer said she remains focused on finding out what really happened to Halbach's personal artifacts, including her purse, her full set of keys, her shoes, and the money that was in her RAV4. All of the items remain missing. She also said an unknown sample of DNA was found on the license plates that were taken from Halbach's vehicle and discarded into one of the junked vehicles on the Avery property. Quote, part of our case moving forward will involve more scientific testing, including the DNA on the license plates, unquote, she said. From her perspective, one matter that involves Sawinski's middle of the night eyewitness account of observing Bobby Dassey in a second person pushing Halbach's RAV4 along Avery Road needs further clarification. Sawinski described the person helping Bobby Dassey as being an older man. However, Zellner said that Sawinski's physical description of the person matches Dassey's close friend, Michael Osmondson. Quote, that big hulking guy fit like a T. It didn't fit the description of Stephen Avery's brother Chuck, and it definitely was not his older brother or his other brother Earl. The person fit Michael Osmondson. He was very heavy set and had a long beard, and his statement was kind of incriminating, unquote, Zellner insisted. Zellner suspects that Bobby Dassey and Osmondson drove the RAV4 from the turnaround on Highway 147, and they decided to push it once they reached Avery Road because they knew they needed to be quiet. Otherwise, they would wake up Stephen Avery and his relatives. Quote, they had to be so quiet and disconnect the headlights and push it past Chuck Avery's, Zellner said. Stephen Avery has said that if anybody came in that driveway, my mother and I would have heard that too, unquote. In addition to Sawinski and Barash, Kevin Romlow also signed an affidavit giving Zellner 3 separate independent witnesses who saw someone other than Stephen Avery in control of Halbach's RAV4 after her disappearance and probable death. Quote, I think she was dismembered in Bobby Dassey's garage like a deer, quote, unquote, Zellner said. Quote, 60% of her bones were never recovered, including the spine and ribs, unquote. 2 months after Making a Murderer Season 2, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Detective Andy Colborn was back in the national spotlight, this time by his own choosing. On December 17, 2018, Colborn filed a defamation lawsuit against Netflix, Chrome Media, Synthesis Films, Laura Riccardi, Moira Demos, Laura Nishimura, Adam Del Dio, and Mary Manhart. Riccardi, Demos, Nishimura, and Del Dio were executive producers of Making a Murderer, and Manhart and Demos were its editors. With an estimated 117 million subscribers worldwide, Netflix distributed the true crime documentary, and Chrome Media and Synthesis Films were the independent film companies owned by Riccardi and Demos, according to the lawsuit. Quote, despite overwhelming evidence proving Avery and Dassey's guilt and the utter absence of evidence supporting defendants' accusations of police misconduct, defendants falsely led viewers to the inescapable conclusion I'm finding where it is, that plaintiff and others planted evidence to frame Avery for Halbach's murder, unquote, Colborn's defamation lawsuit declared. Quote, defendants omitted, distorted, and falsified material and significant facts in an effort to portray plaintiff as a corrupt police officer who planted evidence to frame an innocent man. Defendants did so with actual malice, and in order to make the film more profitable and more successful in the eyes of their peers, sacrificing and defaming the plaintiff's character and reputation in the process, unquote. How many years was it in between when the documentarians were filming and then when it came out, right? It's like it was 10 years, right? They have no clue that this thing is ever going to be successful or that it was going to hit like it hit. So it's so dumb. According to Colborn's lawsuit, Avery's murder trial attorneys, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, played the audio portion of Deputy Colborn's call to Manitowoc County Police Dispatch. This was intended to convince the jurors Colborn discovered Halbach's SUV at an undisclosed location on November 3, 2005, 2 days before it was found. Quote, Riccardi and Demo, it says Demo here, in concert with other named defendants, heavily edited portions of defendants' testimony in order to manipulate viewers to falsely conclude that he and other officers planted Halbach's SUV at the salvage yard, unquote, Colborn's lawsuit asserted. Quote, defendants Riccardi and Demos strategically spliced and it's got in quotes, reaction shots of the plaintiff appearing nervous and apprehensive at trial into other portions of his testimony where he did not appear nervous or apprehensive in fact. The edits Sorry, that's my friend calling me. I'll have to call him when I'm done with this. Reaction shots of the plaintiff appearing nervous and apprehensive at trial into other portions of his testimony where he did not appear nervous or apprehensive in fact. The edits were part of defendant's overall attempt to manipulate viewers to falsely conclude that plaintiff and other Manitowoc County officers planted Halbach's SUV at the salvage yard, unquote. Colborn's defamation lawsuit against Netflix also took issue with the film's portrayal of his role of finding Halbach's spare ignition key for her RAV4 on Avery's bedroom floor. Quote, defendants separately and severally with actual malice led viewers to the inescapable but false conclusion that plaintiff and MTSO Lieutenant James Link planted the ignition key for Halbach's SUV in Avery's bedroom. They did so by splicing trial testimony, omitting other testimony, and failing to include essential photographic evidence that would have given viewers a complete view of what occurred, unquote, Colborn's lawsuit contended. 3 days after Halbach's RAV4 was discovered on the Avery property, Colborn and Lieutenant Lynx searched Avery's bedroom for evidence more remotely connected to the crime, including pornographic material, the defamation lawsuit outlined. Calumet County Deputy Daniel Kucharski accompanied them, and this was not their first time searching Avery's tiny bedroom. Days prior, Colborn noted Manitowoc County deputies saw, quote, handcuffs and leg irons, apparent sex toys, and pornographic materials in a bookcase that were not collected at that time, unquote. Then, on November 8, 2005, as Colborn, quote, roughly returned a large binder, unquote, he and Link discovered Halbach's ignition key on the carpet next to Avery's bedroom bookcase. Quote, at trial, Colborn's lawsuit points out, Colborn, Link, and Kucharski each offered a reasonable explanation as to how the key was missed on the earlier search and miscellaneous entries. All three testified they believed the key had fallen from a crack in the particle board backing of the bookcase when plaintiff roughly returned the binder into the bookcase. They believed Avery hid the key there with plans to retrieve it later and dispose of the SUV. Defendants Riccardi and Demos filmed the entire trial and chose to fabricate testimony by splicing or admitting those portions not consistent with their false and defamatory account of the facts. In truth, plaintiff and Link did not plant the key, and MAM's aspersions that they did are false and could have irreparable harm to plaintiff's reputation, unquote. Colborn's lawsuit against Netflix claimed his, quote, reputation has been irreparably harmed. Devoted husband, not parent, decorated United States Air Force veteran, and dedicated public servant. Plaintiff enjoyed an impeccable professional reputation prior to December 18, 2015, when Making a Murderer first aired. Prior to December 18, during the intervening 3 years, plaintiff has been subject to worldwide ridicule, contempt, and disdain as a result of the baseless and false assertions in Making a Murderer that he planted evidence to frame an innocent man or strengthen the case against a guilty one, unquote. Prior to the Netflix release of Making a Murderer, Colborn noted that his name appeared on internet search engines for only two different news articles about a routine crime near Manitowoc. Quote, the same search now yields more than 1.8 million hits, nearly all of them painting plaintiff in a negative light. Here. Unquote, his lawsuit stated. In addition, there have been 732 YouTube videos about Colborn and his, quote, perceived nefarious role in the Avery case. National and international news and entertainment media have published hundreds of articles, television and radio segments adopting the defendant's foregone but false conclusion that plaintiff and other Manitowoc County police officers planted evidence. Social media, including Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit, is replete with threats and insults directed at plaintiff because of the baseless accusations against plaintiff forced upon viewers of MAM, unquote, the defamation lawsuit claimed. Colborn and his Manitowoc-based lawyer Michael Griesbach of Griesbach Law Offices insisted that people have made countless tweets, memes, insulting and threatening social media posts portraying Colborn as a corrupt police officer and a prime mover in framing Avery. The defamation lawsuit suggests Demos, Riccardi, and the rest of the co-defendants could have mitigated the harm to Colborn's reputation, quote, by admitting their distortions and omissions of fact when the above-mentioned articles were published and in the sequel to the original series, Making a Murderer, Part 2. Instead, with actual malice, defendants doubled down by distorting and omitting additional facts to bolster their preordained conclusion that plaintiff participated in the framing of Avery, unquote. Colborn revealed he has received serious and ongoing threats to his and his family's safety, giving him extreme anxiety on a daily basis. The recorded telephone threats fill the capacity of 28 compact discs. Quote, Avery sympathizers have threatened to kill plaintiff and members of his family, kidnap and sodomize him, and gang rape his wife, unquote, his lawsuit maintained. Quote, photographs of plaintiff's children have been posted online by hateful viewers under the spell of MAM. Repeat late-night telephone calls to plaintiff's residence were commonplace in the aftermath of MAM's release, with callers screaming profanities and threatening to do physical harm. Defendants' tortious conduct has changed nearly every aspect of plaintiff's life, from travel plans to whether or where he and his wife go out to eat. Constantly on alert for danger to his family's safety whenever they leave their home, plaintiff suffers from extreme exhaustion and anxiety, yet he seeks a camera whenever he can. Lastly, Griesbach asked that Netflix and the other defendants provide his client with a retraction and an honest clarification of the erroneous and false statements and depictions cited in Colborn's lawsuit, quote, to clear his good name and restore peace of mind, unquote. Their lawsuit sought unspecified monetary damages for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligence. Originally filed at the Manitowoc County Courthouse, Colborn's lawsuit was later refiled on April 3, 2019 in Wisconsin's federal court system. The judge was later assigned to U.S. District Judge Brett Ludwig. In 2020, the Senate confirmed the 51-year-old Ludwig, a federal district judge for the Eastern District of Wisconsin, based in Milwaukee. A resident of suburban Mequon, Ludwig obtained his bachelor's with high honors from the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point in 1991, and his law degree from the University of Minnesota in 1994. After law school, he served as a clerk for the U.S. Court of Appeals 8th Circuit. By 2022, the defamation case against Netflix remained unresolved, but the plaintiff's case appeared on the verge of collapse. On September 18, 2022, my online news article for Patch reported that Colborn was forced to admit that his marriage had fallen apart, and that was not the fault of Netflix or the filmmakers of Making a Murderer. On July 21, 2022, Colborn gave a sworn statement for his federal lawsuit that certainly was not helpful. Quote, "For purposes of this case, I've agreed not to assert that Making a Murderer caused my divorce. I had a romantic relationship with Jody Moorer prior to my divorce from Ms. Colborn. Making a Murderer did not cause Ms. Moorer to avoid romantic involvement with me. My relationship with Miss Moorer harmed my relationship with my ex-wife, Miss Colborn," unquote, Andy Colborn testified. Colborn's divorce became final in February 2022. Quote, "My relationship with Ms. Moorer also harmed my relationship with my adult children," unquote, the now retired sheriff's detective further testified. In addition to Colborn's testimony regarding the fall of his marriage, several other statements attributed to him were made part of his court file against Netflix. The 2022 court documents indicated Colborn had wanted to sue Avery's original criminal defense attorneys, Dean Strang and Jerry Buting. The following were some of the lawsuit stipulations entered into Colborn's court file against Netflix. Quote, "I believe that Jerome Buting has damaged my reputation in out-of-court statements about me that were made after the release of Making a Murderer. At one point, unquote. At one point, Mr. Colborn wanted to sue Mr. Buting for defamation. At one point, Mr. Colborn wanted to sue Mr. Strang for defamation. Mr. Colborn has not watched Making a Murderer in its entirety. Upon announcing his retirement, Mr. Colborn received supportive calls from dozens of people. In 2016, Mr. Colborn was already preparing to retire from the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office in no more than 3 years. Mr. Colborn voluntarily retired in 2018. Mr. Colborn had a retirement party. Since his retirement, Mr. Colborn decided to return to the workforce and was able to find new employment. Mr. Colborn's faith community supported him after the release of Making a Murderer. No one has confronted Mr. Colborn as a result of Making a Murderer. Mr. Colborn has not lost income due to Making a Murderer. Mr. Colborn had an affair with Jody Moorer while married to Ms. Colborn. Mr. Colborn's infidelity irreparably harmed his relationship with his ex-wife, Ms. Colborn. Mr. Colborn's infidelity also harmed his relationship with his adult children. Mr. Colborn filed for divorce from his now ex-wife, Barb Colborn, in March 2021. Mr. Colborn's divorce from Ms. Colborn was finalized in February 2022. Unquote. 4 years after Colborn's defamation lawsuit moved to Milwaukee's federal court, his case came to a stunning and abrupt halt. On March 10, 2023, U.S. District Court Judge Brett Lutwig issued a 31-page, a 31-page ruling granting Netflix's motion for summary judgment, granting Riccardi, Demos, and Chrome Media's motion for summary judgment, and denying plaintiff Colborn's motion for partial summary judgment. Zellner was not surprised Colborn lost his lawsuit. Quote, "Defamation cases against public figures are notoriously hard to win, and you got to have a lot of money. You have to prove actual malice," unquote, Zellner told me on September 29, 2023. Quote, "I was flabbergasted the suit was filed. It was completely ill-conceived, cost a lot of money, and it was completely without merit, and the judge dismissed it on a summary judgment, finding there was no evidence at all that the producers had distorted any of the facts of the case. And I think, really, with Colborn, it backfired on him. I don't know who advised him to file it." I thought it was Griesbach. I mean, I could take a guess, but it was one of the most frivolous lawsuits I've seen in a long time. I think they probably should have been sanctioned for filing it. And I think it was maybe a publicity stunt. In a way, it just backfired because there's a written opinion by the judge saying there was no defamation and there was no distortion. So it actually reflected really well on the producers of Making a Murderer. Unquote. For crusaders of the First Amendment, oh, funny, First Amendment, because that's something I'm dealing with right now, especially the news media, Judge Ludwig's ruling in Colburn versus Netflix may become one of the most significant modern-day legal rulings for defamation lawsuits brought against the press or filmmakers. The judge showed a deep understanding of Making a Murderer and the evidence from Avery's 2007 murder trial. As a result, Judge Ludwig crafted a masterfully written 31-page decision addressing the tenets of Colburn's defamation lawsuit. Even the opening summary of Ludwig's decision reads like something out of a John Grisham novel. Quote, on December 18, 2015, Netflix released the 10-part docuseries Making a Murderer and turned small-town sergeant Andrew Colburn into a household name. He now very much wishes it had not. His unflattering portrayal in the series transformed his 15 minutes of fame into what felt like a far longer period of infamy as a mob of outraged viewers flooded his voicemail and email inboxes with violent, hostile messages. Some called him a crooked cop. Others wished him a long, unpleasant stay in a fiery perdition. At least one person threatened to harm his family. Meanwhile, 2,000 miles away, Making a Murderer's producers were basking in accolades and consorting with major media outlets. Critics lauded their journalistic integrity, or journalistic tenacity, and unique ability to synthesize the legal and dramatic. Colburn received no such flattery. As the producers took the stage at the Microsoft Theater to accept their Emmys, he was busy boarding up the front door to his own house. Boarding up the door to his house? Outraged by what he believed to be grossly unjust, inverted life trajectories, Colburn filed this lawsuit accusing Netflix Inc., Chrome Media LLC, and producers Laura Riccardi and Moira Demos of defamation. Next came the probative question before the court. Had Colburn provided sufficient evidence to make a defamation case out of his portrayal in Making a Murderer? Quote, he has not, unquote, the judge in Milwaukee ruled. Quote, the First Amendment does not guarantee a public figure like Colburn the role of protagonist in popular discourse. In fact, it protects the media's ability to cast him in a much less flattering light. So defendants are entitled to summary judgment on all counts, unquote. Of note, the judge revealed Colburn only watched about 1 hour of the entire 2 seasons of Making a Murderer. To prove defamation under Wisconsin law, Colburn needed to prove Netflix and the filmmakers published a false, defamatory, and unprivileged statement. Furthermore, for public officials such as Colburn, the First Amendment requires, quote, clear and convincing evidence that the defendant published the defamatory statement with actual malice, i.e. with knowledge that it was false or with reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. I have people trying to get me fired for something that I've exposed. But it's my First Amendment right to post it. The following is a condensed summary of Ludwig's findings. Page 5, quote, his summary judgment motion adopts an overbroad view of defamation, identifying 52 allegedly defamatory statements, but most of his gripes read more like media criticism better suited to the op-ed section. They are not actionable statements that could even potentially be defamatory under Wisconsin law. Those few statements that might conceivably be actionable fail for other reasons. Colborne's defamation by fabricated quotation claim fares no better because the record shows no instance in which defendants did not convey the gist of a changed quotation. Colborne's final theory, a claim for defamation by implication — if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. What's with all the rhymes? — also fails because he has not produced sufficient evidence to sustain it. His kitchen sink approach identifies 52 instances of alleged defamation. He cites the series' use of music and graphics, its inclusion of certain statements of and concerning other people, its incorporation of true statements or protected opinions, and the alteration of reaction shots from Avery's homicide trial. None of these can support a claim for defamation. Unquote. Page 7, quote, other parts of Colborne's case reflect his own dissatisfaction with what is in fact the verifiable truth. It is well established that truth is an absolute defense to a defamation claim. Thus, in defamation lawsuits at least, verity still prevails, even if the audience lacks the temperament for it. Altogether, Colborne complains 7 times of statements that no one, not even he himself, can prove false. In these instances, it is the facts that aggrieve Colborne, and there is no legal remedy for that. Unquote. I filed a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act, to get the police video for when one of my public officials was arrested for a DUI. And I then posted the video. And so I have people trying to get me fired because how they say I am bullying this drunk driver by posting the video. You're an elected official and you're a dumbass that got a DUI. I can post it. And I don't care if people don't like it. You should be mad at the drunk driver who they have multiple DUIs. I've been asked to take it down. I will not. Pum, pum, pum. Page 9. Quote, Colborne's complaint includes a defamation fabricated quotation theory. The idea here is that in the course of condensing the trial footage, defendants deliberately altered Colborne's words to make him appear more contemptible. Of course, some alteration is necessary. No documentary is true in the strictest sense of the word. They all abbreviate, edit, and emphasize. But there are degrees of falsity, and for defamation purposes, the question is where to draw the line. Unquote. That brings me back to convicting a murderer that wants to say making a murderer, edited and blah, 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 blah. And now you're seeing in Colborne's thing, oh, they used graphics and played music. So does convicting a murderer. Does all the same. Page 17, quote, Colborne also challenges the producer's decision to show him agreeing that he could understand how someone might think he was looking at Halbach's Toyota based only on the audio of his dispatch call. In fact, Colborne never answered that question because his attorney objected and the judge sustained the objection. But, though not depicted in Making a Murderer, Colborne later affirmed on the witness stand that the call sounded like hundreds of other license plate or registration checks he had done before. So he always calls on a personal phone? In essence, he testified that the audio closely resembled a mine-run dispatch call. Thus, Colborne implicitly admitted that, based only on the audio of his dispatch call, it sounded like he had Halbach's license plate in his field of vision. Unquote. Page 20, quote, Moreover, by excluding certain portions of his deposition testimony, Making a Murderer may have actually enhanced Colborne's credibility. At his deposition, Colborne unequivocally denied ever broaching the 1994 or 1995 phone call with District Attorney Rohrer. Rohrer's testimony called that into question. Were Making a Murderer that calibrated hit piece, Colburn claims the producers surely would have leapt at the chance to catch the object of their disdain in an outright lie. Unquote. Page 22, quote, Colburn argues that making a murderer falsely implies that he committed criminal acts, planting evidence, and is thus defamatory per se. Defendants assert that Colburn's case falls short for at least 3 reasons. 1. The implication that Colburn planted evidence is not reasonably conveyed and attributable to defendants. 2. Colburn cannot prove that he did not plant evidence. And 3. Colburn cannot satisfy defamation by implication's heightened actual malice standard. The first 2 arguments fail. A reasonable jury might find that making a murderer falsely implied that Colburn planted evidence. But because the defendants are correct that Colburn cannot show actual malice, this theory also fails. A faithful recreation of the entire trial, framing, defense, and all, would also have defeated any claim for defamation. Yet making a murderer is not always so even-handed in its presentation. To the extent it qualifies as journalism, it often hews closer to gonzo than objective, and its visual language could be read to suggest something perhaps more nefarious than the totality of the evidence warrants. Thus, a fair-minded jury could conclude that making a murderer not so subtly nudges viewers toward the conclusion that Colburn did, in fact, plant evidence to frame Stephen Avery. The same jury could also find the implicit conclusion false. Unquote. Page 26, quote, Colburn cites a trove of email chains that purportedly established the actual malice of both the producers and Netflix. Most of these exchanges, however, support the defendant's position that they did not intend to imply and were not aware that viewers might infer that Colburn actually planted evidence to frame Avery. At most, this collection of emails suggests the producer's sympathy for Avery's plight. But even sympathy for the devil is not clear and convincing proof of actual malice toward the Holy Trinity. Furthermore, in interviews conducted contemporaneous to Making a Murderer's release, Riccardi and Demos said that they were not trying to provide any answers and did not have a conclusion, and that there are a lot of questions here. This undercuts any inference of defamatory intent or reckless disregard, unquote. Page 27, quote, in sum, a reasonable jury might conclude that making a murderer implied that Colburn framed Avery, but because Colburn has no evidence that Riccardi, Demos, or Crome intended to that implication or recklessly disregarded its possible existence with malice, the producers are entitled to summary judgment, unquote. Page 29, quote, in addition, as a matter of law, Netflix exhibited actual malice only if it intended to imply a defamatory, materially false, and unprivileged statement. But even if Netflix intended to imply that Colburn planted evidence, Colburn has no evidence that Netflix knew that statement to be false. No one on Netflix's creative team ever spoke to anyone depicted in Making a Murderer. They never even watched the raw trial footage, instead relying solely on the cuts the producers provided. Colburn himself admitted under oath that those who did not attend Avery's criminal trial could not have known what occurred there, including former district attorney Michael Griesbach, who has written 3 books on the subject. By that logic, a handful of Netflix employees with no legal education and limited exposure to trial testimony cannot possibly have understood the intricacies of the case, unquote. Finally, Judge Ludwig delivered his knockout punch for Colburn's lawsuit. On page 30, the Milwaukee judge delivered this zinger, quote, in the end, Colburn's turn in Making a Murderer may not have been to his liking, but that does not make it defamatory. Few aspire to enter the cultural zeitgeist on such controversial terms. That possibility, though, is a necessary byproduct of the freedom of press that the First Amendment projects or protects. If media could portray us only at our best, we would be a country of antiseptic caricatures and less intelligent for it. We have not sunken so low just yet. Unquote. This section is called The Bob Dylan of Making a Murderer. In the aftermath of Making a Murderer, several people across the globe became social media influencers because of their lively true crime broadcasts. I'm not reading this. Hold on. We're going to get done with this faster because I'm not going to read it. Here. Now we're on pictures. Now we're to epilogue. Stephen Avery talks. On November 10, 2023, Stephen Avery spoke with Zellner for a half hour during a tape-recorded phone call made from Avery's medium security prison in Fox Lake, Wisconsin. The call's purpose was to provide readers of Wrecking Crew with an update of Avery's plight, his prospects for a new murder trial, and his reflections on his sister Barb Taddock's son, Bobby Dassey, as the alternative suspect in the 2005 death of Teresa Halbach. Quote, John Farrick is updating his book, and it's going to come out in a couple of weeks, unquote, Zellner told Avery. Quote, and so I'm going to ask you a series of questions, okay? Unquote. Zellner began by asking Avery for his reaction to the recent assignment of a new judge to handle his post-conviction appeals. Quote, well, it was about time. Get rid of her, unquote, Avery said, referring to Sheboygan Judge Angela Suckowitz. Quote, well, because I wrote to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. I wrote to her boss to kind of get rid of her, unquote. Quote, actually, the way this happened, unquote, Zellner explained to Avery, quote, she made a motion to the court to be removed from the case. So they didn't remove her. She removed herself. I don't know if you were aware of that. It didn't have anything to do with what we tried to do, because we filed formal motions a couple of years ago, but there wasn't any legal way to have her removed. I mean, people complain about judges all the time, but what she did was she removed herself, so she's off the case. What do you think about having a new judge? Unquote. Quote, well, a lot better, Avery answered. Terrific, better than her. I don't think she should be on the bench. If she can't follow the law, then she don't need to be on there, unquote. Zellner's next question pertained to the newly elected judge from Manitowoc, Anthony Lambrecht, who was just assigned to handle Avery's post-conviction appeals. Quote, well, I know he's 6 months on the bench, Avery replied. He worked for the public defender's office and some of the police department, but that's all I know, unquote. Quote, well, do you think he's going to be more balanced? Zellner inquired. He's been on both sides. He's been a police officer and also working for the public defender, unquote. Quote, yeah, it's probably a little better, because then he's coming into a new set of eyes, unquote, Avery said before pausing and finally blurting out, maybe, as he began laughing. Quote, I feel the same way, unquote, Zellner told him. Quote, I feel optimistic about it. I think it's a good thing, unquote. From there, the conversation steered toward Bobby Dassey. Zellner reminded Avery how her law office identified multiple witnesses, including Thomas Sawinski, the Manitowoc newspaper carrier, who saw Bobby Dassey pushing Halbach's RAV4 along Avery Road during the middle of the night, just hours before the RAV4 turned up on the edge of Avery salvage yard. Quote, Kevin Romlow, having seen the car, Thomas Brush, having seen Bobby driving the car. What's your assessment of all that? What effect should that have on the case? Unquote, Zellner asked. Quote, well, Avery answered, that kind of proved that he's got her car, saying that I'm right, that I got nothing to do with it. He does. It's all going back to him and the computer, that he was sick on the computer, and that is a factor, unquote. Quote, do you think he was interested in Teresa Halbach? Unquote, Zellner followed up. Quote, well, most of the time he was watching her, unquote, Avery said of his nephew, Bobby Dassey. Quote, every time she came, he would always say something. He'd say, I see your girlfriend came, which is, he wanted her. He knew every time that she was going to come out, unquote. And that's exactly what Stephen told me on one of our visits. Quote, so you noticed that he was interested in Teresa Halbach, unquote, Zellner wondered. Quote, when she came, he was always there and looking out the window, unquote, Avery pointed out. Quote, so he was watching her, unquote. Quote, yeah, Avery answered, because I talked about it when I got her coming one day with all the vehicles and the boat and the trailer. He'd always say and comment on it. Zellner wanted to know, or unquote. Zellner wanted to know if Avery remembered how Bobby Dassey acted once Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputies, notably Deputy Colborne, visited Avery salvage yard in the days after Halbach went missing. Quote, how did Bobby act then? Unquote. Quote, well, he was different, Avery replied. He was nervous and with Mike Osmondson and all of that, unquote. Quote, how did he act differently? Unquote, Zellner pressed. Quote, well, he was mostly nervous, unquote, Avery said. Quote, then we wanted to go to Menards, and he had something to do. But then when I went down in the pit with the other ones, when Chucky seen the taillights or headlights, he wanted to come with me. Now, all the other times he didn't want to come. He was busy. But now he made sure he wanted to come. I'll come with you, unquote. Quote, did he know that your finger was bleeding? Unquote, Zellner inquired. Quote, yeah, unquote. Next, Avery was asked what happened when he and his brother Chuck left Avery salvage yard to drive to the Menard store in Manitowoc. At that point, the criminal investigation into Halbach's disappearance was still in its infancy. Quote, and you pulled out onto the road. What did you notice in the rearview mirrors? Unquote, Zellner inquired. Quote, well, I seen tail lights back behind me, Avery remembered. I said, oh, I've seen tail lights. I told Chucky. Then he asked me, do you want me to turn around and look? And I said, I don't know. Then we just got up the road a little bit, I think, and I said, yeah, let's turn around. Let's go back. So then he turned the flatbed around and we went back, and I looked all over and I didn't see nothing. Unquote. The lawyer asked if Avery suspected a vehicle just left his trailer. Quote, yeah, he agreed. We just left from there. I know there was nothing there. There were no cars moving, so the only one that I think was there was Bobby. Unquote. Quote, and so did you notice at any point that someone tried to get in your trailer? Unquote. Quote, not at that time, no, unquote, Avery answered. Avery recalled it was not until he was arrested and awaiting his trial for murder that he began reviewing various crime scene evidentiary photographs from the police. One photograph in particular caught his eye because it showed the door to his red trailer with pry bar marks on it. Quote, and that's when you realized that the door had probably been pried open? Unquote, Zellner wondered. Quote, yeah, agreed Avery, unquote. Quote, what about with Bobby, though? What was your observation about his relationship with Mike Osmondson? Unquote. Quote, I know they were close, Avery told her. They always hung out with each other. They were like two peas in a pod. Unquote. Quote, what about the conversation where they were trying to testify against you about a conversation after Teresa had disappeared? What do you remember about that? Unquote. Quote, well, they walked up to me, and I don't know where I was, by Barbara's van or something, somewhere in that area, Avery recalled. And then they just made a comment. You got her in the bedroom or in the closet or something? And then I said some comment back, unquote. Quote, and then when they tried to testify, did you think they were lying about the conversation, the date, unquote? Zellner followed up. Quote, yeah, Avery answered, unquote. Quote, and when Bobby testified at trial, what did you think when you saw him testify, unquote? Quote, when he got nerves and, I don't know, tried to pin everything on me, unquote, Avery responded. Quote, was he lying, unquote, Zellner followed up. Quote, oh yeah, he lies about everything, Avery remarked. Sometimes I let him use my Cadillac and my Blazer and take it to school. And then he lied about that because he'd do some donuts with it and squawk them tires. And then he said he never did it. But then I hear from everybody else he did. And back in the salvage yard, he'd take stereos out of cars and radios and sell it to the people in the school, unquote. Quote, was he lying to you guys about that? About taking that stuff? Unquote. Quote, oh yeah, Avery replied, unquote. Quote, what about his computer? What did you know about that? Was he on the computer a lot? Unquote. Quote, well, pretty much, Avery said. But then Barbara tried to get somebody in because it was, I don't know, she was having problems with it. That's when it was in Bobby's room. She had a couple people come over and try to fix it. They tried to get shit off her or something, unquote. Quote, she talked to Brad Dassey about trying to get items on it deleted, right? Unquote. Quote, yeah, I think that after the second time when she tried to do that, unquote, Avery responded. We're almost done. Quote, but she had computer people come and try and look at it, unquote. Quote, I don't know, a friend or someone she knew or something, unquote, Avery explained. Zellner asked Avery to describe what kind of relationship his co-defendant, Brendan Dassey, had with his brother Bobby. Quote, well, it was kind of rough, Avery said. Brendan would do his schoolwork, and Bobby would come and hit him on the side of the head and go out the door. He was a mean guy. He'd pick on him all the time, unquote. Quote, did either Brendan or Blaine ever talk about Bobby looking at a lot of porn on the computer? Unquote. Quote, yeah, I don't know. I don't really remember, unquote, Avery said. Zellner reminded Avery that when Bobby Dassey testified at Avery's trial, he told everyone he last saw Halbach walking toward Avery's red trailer. Quote, did she come to your trailer door that day? Unquote, Zellner asked. No, Avery replied. Quote, so you knew that he was lying, right? Unquote. Quote, oh yeah, because I don't think you can see my front door from their house. You can't, I looked. Unquote, Avery noted. Quote, from Barbara's house, unquote. Quote, and he said he was watching out the window? Unquote. Quote, yeah, unquote. Quote, so in your mind, do you feel pretty confident that he's the one that murdered Teresa Halbach? Unquote. Quote, oh yeah, Avery answered, might say 100%. And then other people are involved. Maybe that Mike, maybe Scott. I don't know. Scott was there that day. He was on Barbara's property talking to Bobby, unquote. Quote, what time of day was he there? Unquote. Quote, around noon, somewhere in there, Avery said. And I knew Barbara wasn't home. So I was wondering, why is he out here when Barbara ain't here? And then I seen Bobby talking to him, unquote. Quote, and then, of course, Scott lied about that at trial, right? He never admitted being there, unquote. Zellner reminded Avery. Quote, do you remember the story they had? They drove by each other exactly at 3 p.m., unquote. Quote, yeah, I think that was all a lie, Avery suggested. If they were by Fisherville Road, Jumbo Creek Road, their cell phones would come off of Mishicot, not the other way. So that's all a lie, unquote. Quote, what do you think about the timing of Scott and Barb's marriage? Unquote, Zellner inquired. Quote, well, it's all strange, Avery responded. Everything is strange. Tom Yonda and Barbara would always go over there by his trailer almost every night, unquote. Quote, Scott's trailer? Unquote. Quote, yeah, unquote. Quote, do you think the timing of their marriage before the trial had anything to do with the trial itself? Unquote, Zellner asked. Quote, yeah, I would say, because if they get married, then husband and wife don't have to testify against each other, unquote, Avery said. Quote, what about Brendan at this point? What are your thoughts about him? Unquote. Quote, I don't know, Avery replied. That's all up to him. I don't know if he's guilty or innocent. I don't know if he helped Bobby or not. I don't know. I don't know if they put her in that blue trailer or what. He come up with a story for a reason. I don't know why, unquote. Quote, so you think that he lied? What he was talking about actually might have happened, but it was Bobby instead of you? Unquote, Zellner asked. Quote, yeah, Avery agreed, and that trailer was the blue trailer, and that's why they got rid of it, unquote. Zellner asked where the blue trailer was kept. Quote, it was right aside the road coming down to me, Avery recalled, right before Barbara's house. Quote, okay, and at what point was that trailer disposed of? Was it before the trial? Unquote. Quote, I don't know, Avery answered. All I know is that Earl moved it down in the pit, and they put up a fence, and after that, I couldn't tell you. Whenever they put up the fence, they took it out of there, unquote. Quote, and then it was destroyed, unquote. Quote, yeah, then they destroyed it, Avery said, and they destroyed Bobby's blazer and all of that, unquote. Quote, yeah, so tell me about that, Zellner inquired. So, Bobby, was it the blazer that he was driving that day that Teresa disappeared? Unquote. Quote, yeah, black blazer, unquote, Avery pointed out. Quote, and who took the blazer and destroyed it? Unquote. Quote, it must have been Earl and Chucky, Avery said of his two brothers, because he only had it for a month. He only had it for a month. Unquote. Quote, was it in good condition? Unquote. Quote, yeah, it was in good condition. Ran good, transmission was good, the tires were good, the brakes were good, everything was good on it, unquote, Avery insisted. Quote, so they destroyed both the blazer and the blue trailer, right? Unquote. Quote, yeah, and they got rid of Barbara's vehicles too, and they crushed them all, Avery remarked. The van and everything. Everything which she had sitting there, unquote. Quote, so the van that she was going to sell, they crushed it? Unquote. Quote, yeah, they crushed all of that, unquote. Quote, and can you think of any reason to have done that? Unquote. Quote, well, they wanted to make sure there was no evidence nowhere. That's all I can think of, unquote, Avery surmised. Quote, do you believe, and we put forth in the briefs, that it was Bobby? What do you think Barb thinks? Do you think Barb knows that he was involved? Unquote. Quote, well, maybe not at first, but I figured after that, yeah, they all knew, unquote, Avery replied. Quote, have any of them ever explained how Teresa's bones ended up in the Dassey burn barrel? Unquote, Zellner asked. Quote, no, Avery replied, unquote. Quote, and has Barb ever responded or said anything about Bobby pushing Teresa's car? Unquote. Quote, no, she never wanted to talk about it, unquote. Quote, and at some point, did she put on Facebook that Bobby had told her that he never saw Teresa walk towards your trailer? Unquote. Quote, yeah, I think there was a time she put it on Facebook that Bobby said she left, unquote. I have that screenshot of that in MAM Gossip. Quote, so tell me now at this point, the appeal is pending with the new evidence with Thomas Sawinski. What do you hope, like best case scenario? What do you hope will happen when it gets to the appellate court? Unquote, Zellner inquired. Quote, well, I think they should give me a new trial and let the jury decide, Avery answered. That's what I think they're going to do, is just give me a new trial, and it will go back to circuit court, unquote. Quote, and probably would be in front of this judge, the new judge we've got, Zellner noted, don't you think? Unquote. Yeah, Avery responded. Quote, because he won't have any involvement in the decision on the appeal because Suckowitz did that, but it would come back to him for trial, Zellner explained. Do you think you'd get a fair trial with him, or would you want to try to move it? Unquote. Quote, I don't know. I don't know nothing about him or what. I just don't want a Manitowoc jury, unquote, Avery remarked. Quote, right, Zellner agreed, laughing. So you'd have to get a jury from elsewhere or try to move it from Manitowoc. Is there any other message that you'd want for John Farrick to put in his book from you? I mean, you could actually just give the message right now to people that are following it, your prediction on what's going to happen, unquote. Almost done. We're on the last page and a quarter. Quote, well, I think I'm going to get a new trial, but then I want who's all involved, to go to trial, unquote, Avery replied. So this don't happen to another person again. There's got to be consequences. If you set somebody up, you've got to make sure it don't happen again, unquote. Quote, so you would like to see if you had a new trial and you're acquitted, then you would like to see that people that were involved in framing you would like to see those people go to prison? Unquote, Zellner asked. Yeah. Quote, and you would like to see Bobby Dassey charged with the murder? Unquote. Quote, oh yeah, that would be the first thing to do, Avery said. Why don't they arrest him, and then they ought to let me go? We already got the judge saying that he's got the vehicle, so that should be enough evidence and everything, unquote. Quote, right, Zellner quipped. Nobody's really questioning that he had the car. Okay, can you think of anything else that you would want to say in a book? Unquote. Quote, I'm sick of doing time for something I didn't do. Unquote, Avery told his lawyer. Quote, and I've got to put up with all this corruption in here. Oh, there's so much. Health services unit, the medical department, the dentist is garbage. I've got to wait a year just to get a filling. They pulled my tooth and they didn't have to. If they would have taken care of it right away instead of wait. All they do is tell me, oh, you're on the list, you're on the list. And then with the phone and the video visits, the stuff is so old where you can't get through. And them phone lines are so old, they crackle and everything else. You know, they got no money for us and it's all for them. They get John Deere gators and golf carts and everything for them, but nothing for us. Then the food is garbage. You can barely eat it. The water system is garbage, unquote, Avery opined. Quote, how do you feel about your health is now just in the past year? Unquote, Zellner wondered. Quote, oh, it's better than Waupun. You know, I get more fresh air, unquote. Before ending the prison call, Zellner asked if Avery had anything else to say to his followers and fans across the globe. Quote, I don't know. Thanks for all my supporters out there for me for the truth. That's from the bottom of my heart. The truth has got to come out sooner or later, unquote, Avery remarked. And then the next page and a half is talking about a survey somebody did about convicting a murderer, but I found it all stupid, so I'm not even going to read that. So if you want to read it, you have to buy it for yourself. So, Wrecking Crew by John Farrick. And this is the updated, so it says 5th anniversary edition with updated content and an exclusive new interview with Stephen Avery. So there you go. I bought mine on Amazon. It came to me in 3 days, 2 or 3 days. So go buy this book. While you're there buying that book, you can buy my book, Wrongfully Abused, also on Amazon. And I've been on now for over 2 hours, and now I got to call my friend back, and now my mom is messaging me. So I am going to go. I don't know when I will be live next. So you're always just going to have to stay tuned. You never know when I'm going to pop on, if you're going to get notice or you're not. Like today, the book came and I'm like, forget it. I'm just going to go live right now. So thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your weekend. And as always, investigation continues.